We have the latest on a lawsuit filed against multiple wrestling names, and we have the backstage reaction to last night's CM Punk ESPN interview. But first, AEW Collision will debut tonight on TNT, which will act as a second A show for the company. Leading up to the show, fans have wondered how the presentation will differ from that of AEW Dynamite, something we now have an update on from Tony Khan himself. Khan would last night announce the AEW Collision commentary team, which will feature a completely fresh lineup from that of the Wednesday show. The team will consist of legendary announcer Jim Ross, who will be joined by former ROH World Champion Nigel McGuinness, who's made a name for himself on the booth for NXT UK, Ring of Honor, as well as 205 Live. The third and final commentator will be New Japan Pro-Wrestling English commentator Kevin Kelly, who also used to commentate for Ring of Honor. As well as this, Tony Khan would reveal the intro music for Collision, with Sir Elton John's Saturday Night's Alright for Fighting setting the tone for the show. The company would also release the opening video package that will air at the start of every show, which features CM Punk, FTR, Bullet Club Gold, Samoa Joe, Willow Nightingale, Sky Blue, The Outcasts, Miro, Wardlow, Luchasaurus, Christian Cage, Andrade El Idolo, The House of Black, The Acclaimed, Orange Cassidy, Thunder Rosa, Sting, Scorpio Sky, Daniel Garcia, Jamie Hayter, Britt Baker, Powerhouse Hobbs, MJF, Darby Allin, and Bryan Danielson, as well as a few other names that were taking the moves of the key players. This gives us some idea on who will be featured on the show going forward, and perhaps those that may be appearing less on Dynamite in the weeks and months ahead. With Forbidden Door just over 1 week away, there's been much talk of matches involving talent from New Japan Pro-Wrestling and All Elite Wrestling. With that said, Forbidden Door isn't the only event that will pit stars from both companies against each other, as former AEW World Champion Jon Moxley has now called out a New Japan name to what is expected to be a bloody match, to say the least. Over recent weeks, developments have led to a match being confirmed that will see Moxley and old friend Homicide teaming up against El Desperado and a mystery partner, who has since been revealed to be Jun Kasai, who has made a name for himself as one of Japan's most brutal hardcore wrestlers. The match is set for night 1 of the upcoming NJPW Strong Independence Day event in Tokyo, Japan on July 4th. This is only the appetizer, however, as Moxley has now called out Desperado for what he calls the final death match, with this set to headline night 2 of Independence Day on July 5th. Whilst the rules are still unclear, Desperado was quick to accept. And next we have the latest on the saga involving the Bloodline. Last night on WWE SmackDown, Jey Uso would make his decision on whether he will fall in line with the tribal chief Roman Reigns, or if he will align with his brother Jimmy, who has opted out of the family faction. Throughout the show, his decision was teased leading up to the main event segment, where Jey would make his final decision, a decision that will change the Bloodline forever. Whilst Jey hinted that he would be sticking by Roman Reigns' side, this would lead to a well-executed swerve and a huge pop from the crowd. Jey would state that Jimmy is out, before the Uso stated that he is out too, this before wiping the grin from Roman's face with a super kick. Solo Sikoa would then attempt a Samoan spike in defense of his tribal chief, before Jey ducked, allowing Jimmy to super kick him, before a double super kick knocked him out of the ring. The segment would bring the show to a close, but footage has since been released of what happened after the broadcast. Reigns would be left in shock by what had occurred, this whilst Paul Heyman could be seen in tears as the Bloodline continues to fall. And next we have an update on the recent lawsuit filed against multiple wrestling stars. In February, it was reported that former TNA knockout Raka Khan, real name Tranisha Banks, had filed a lawsuit in October of 2022 in the US District Court's Southern District of New York, alleging that there was a conspiracy against her in regard to the criminal court case that she had been facing since 2019, where she was up against charges of interference with child custody and aggravated kidnapping facilitate. The suit named a whole list of wrestlers and entities as defendants, including the FBI, the New Mexico Police Department, The Rock, Nikki Bella, Michael Jordan, Jim Cornette, Mick Foley, and many more. Well, in a fresh report from PW Insider, the case has now officially been dismissed. The dismissal states that there was no movement on the case, which sought $3 billion in damages, with the report also revealing that none of the defendants were ever served with the suit. And next we have details on the backstage reaction to the recent CM Punk interview with ESPN. Yesterday, ESPN would release an article featuring an interview with the Second City Saint ahead of his return to All Elite Wrestling tonight on the debut episode of Collision. During the chat, Punk would give his side of the story when it comes to the lead up to the events of AEW All Out, including the media scrum, the backstage fight, as well as the tensions between himself, the Elite, and Hangman Page. We have a full breakdown on the channel if you're not fully caught up, so make sure you go and check that out if you haven't done so already. Prior to the article dropping, word began to spread through wrestling media that the AEW locker room had caught wind that this was set to be released, with Wade Keller in particular noting that it was set to cause more issues behind the scenes. In reality, it quickly became clear that the interview was level-headed and far from controversial, and nowhere near as bad as it was being made out to be, a sentiment that is seemingly shared within the company. According to a report from Fightful Select, many within AEW have stated that it didn't seem nearly as bad as indicated, which also appears to be the general consensus amongst the fan base. As for CM Punk and his issues with Hangman Page and the unplanned Colt Cabana remark he made during a promo segment last year, Page has since gone out of his way to not stir any more drama up since, with the report adding, Hangman Page doesn't have restrictions on being able to talk about his experiences with Punk and still goes out of his way to not talk about Punk as to not stir anything up. Dating back to last summer, we're told that Punk had met with higher-ups and had asked that the Hangman Page comments on TV that alluded to Colt Cabana be addressed in some manner, and that he'd grown very frustrated that nothing was done about it to the level of his satisfaction, which he referenced in the ESPN interview. It was also noted that Hangman Page, the Elite, and others were made aware that the interview was coming last weekend. Fightful would also give some context on Punk's reported comments on New Japan Pro-Wrestling's Kenta, who is expected to be his opponent at the Forbidden Door pay-per-view. In a report prior to the interview dropping, it was said that Punk wasn't thrilled with working with Kenta, and he may come across badly in an interview, although no such comments would emerge with ESPN. Well, according to this news story, something separate was filmed in regard to the Kenta Forbidden Door match that was a little different than what AEW had anticipated. This will now likely emerge in the coming days ahead of the show. As for the chances of the incident involving the Elite and CM Punk turned into a storyline, many in CM Punk's camp are still hopeful that this could still happen, although they would confirm that they've been told that it won't. With that said, Fightful would conclude by stating that Punk and Kenny Omega had a non-heated discussion in the minutes following Brawl Out, where Punk said his issue was never with him, but the situation had not died down enough for them to have a constructive conversation in that environment. Fingers crossed that at the very least we get the best bout machine versus the best in the world at some point, although we'll likely have to wait until the Elite's contract situation is cleared up first, with their current deals set to expire by the start of 2024. And before you go, make sure you check out who the surprise could be at the debut episode of AEW Collision.